Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to dish up a little bit of movie news and review a film, either current or classic. With me, as usual, are my wonderful co-hosts, Jim Poliafka. Welcome to the show, babe.
Thanks, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, guys. Sweet dreams are indeed made of this. And by this, I mean reviewing movies with the two of you. I'm so excited tonight.
Aww, I'm blushing. Actually, my face is always a little red, so that's probably what it is. But inside, I'm blushing, Will.
You've got the external glow and the internal blush.
That could also be my screen brightness. I don't know.
That too.
In any event, we got a fun show tonight. We are going to be reviewing Atomic Blonde, a film that unfortunately we didn't get to talk about after South by, but now we get to talk about it because it's in wide release, which is fantastic. So excited for that. We're also going to be dishing up some movie news, things that have perked our interest in the film industry this week. So be on the lookout for those things. Before we dive right in, though, want to give a quick shout out to our live listeners. We see you guys jumping on with us. Hey, glad to have you here. Make sure to jump into the live chat, say hi, give us a shout out, tell us what you think of Atomic Blonde or movie news. And as long as it's, YouTube appropriate, we'll give you a shout out in the chat. And hey, there we go. Steve, welcome, Steve. He says, hello, you handsome devils. Takes one to know one, Steve. Where's your devil horns? Isn't there an emoji for that? I'm sure there must be.
Oh, that's the other movie.
The movie we are not reviewing this week. Not happening. In any event, have you been following that? It has been a dumpster fire. Like, holy crap.
Is it bad that now...
Is that the holy crap emoji?
I kind of want to see it. Like, at this point, like when something is like so anti-hyped, I kind of want to see it just so I can be a part of that conversation. I skipped this one. I think a lot of us skipped this one because it looks bad. It sounds like it is bad, but part of me is like, well, this one's getting dragged so hard. I kind of want to just see it so I can make up my own mind.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that. I don't know that we'll have time to see it, but who knows? Maybe at some point. We'll have literally nothing else going on.
That's Brad saying, Will, if you want to see it, go ahead and knock your...
Oh, trust me, not out. For the show. Like, that would be a... I've got absolutely nothing to do on a specific night. And unfortunately, I don't have any of those coming up anytime soon. So I think the Emoji Movie is just going to have to fall through the cracks.
Maybe. Unless you have time, like... I don't know, between Christmas and New Year's or something, and you and Wiggles are like settled in with some hot cocoa with the doggies, and you need something fun to watch.
There's something to be said for, and so this one's going to be out on Blu-ray / VOD, Redbox, all that stuff in a few months, right? Like, I mean, these things tend to have a pretty quick turnaround. We're coming up on end of year. We're going to have the Prestige season, all of the Oscar movies, and one thing I actually really like doing is intentionally watching a movie that I don't think is going to be all that good somewhere in there, because I feel like it helps me reset my barometer. When you're watching nothing but like the same Prestige style films, I feel like my calibration gets a little off. So I need to watch some junk food movie stuff just to sort of fix myself. So Emoji Movie might be really good for exactly that.
There you go. Pair it with a rewatch of I, Frankenstein and Dracula Untold, and you're good, Will.
Oh, well, yeah. How we...
I love you, but that idea is just like the idea of me actually sitting and doing that. I visualized it, and it was like my life flashed before my eyes, and it was not good. So I'll be passing on that one.
I mean, at the end of the year or at the beginning of next year, we talk about our, when we talk about our best movies of 2017. Now, I don't know if we've done this the last couple times, but usually sometimes we talk about like the worst movies of the year. And how are we going to have any ammunition if none of us have seen the Emoji Movie? Seriously.
It's true. Like, you know, we do have sort of around that time of year, we do tend to talk at least like our least favorite or you know, our bottom three or what have you. We've done it during podcast, a couple times we've done it, you know, written on the site. So I mean, there is something to be said for kind of seeing both ends of the spectrum. I don't know. Shrug
it's
emoji.
true, LeFou. Yeah, maybe we will at some point. I don't know. I feel like I already can't keep up with all the movies we got to see. So
I know, right? Making room for terrible movies is not high on your priority.
Right?
It's true. Like some amazing film that has like tiny distribution would have to get bumped to make room for the Emoji Movie in my schedule. So, do I really want to do that? So
you could miss out on this year's Moonlight or something. You know what I mean? And then. Yeah, I mean, imagine like you know, we get around to our year-end list and I'm not able to say like, oh my god, I really love Moonlight because I spent that time watching the Emoji Movie. But here's the other thing. Taste is subjective, style is subjective, all of that stuff is, right? I posit this. What if specifically to the three of us and to apparently no one else in the world, the Emoji Movie is this year's Moonlight? I wouldn't know if I don't watch it. See, these are the things, like there is a constant battle happening in my brain about like which movie to watch when. You have no idea how like how just like the inner turmoil and pathos that this causes me. So yeah, I probably at some point I will throw myself on the Emoji Movie grenade. I will give it a fair shake, but I'm probably not going to do so in theaters. That's probably a later movie. So, guys, believe it or not, we've spent 8.5 minutes talking about the Emoji Movie.
Oh, it's the Time Police again.
That's me. Well, here's the thing. We've got an out-of-town guest staying with us for a couple days, and he literally just landed. We got him in the door, and we had to come up and podcast. So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to review the film before our hard stop. So we're gonna transition away from the Emoji Movie. Sorry, Emoji Movie. Guys, how do we feel? We kind of had a soft start already, I guess. How do we feel officially kicking off movie news? Jim, are you on board?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into it.
Movie news. Yes.
All right. Sounds good. Well, in that case, here we go. Movie news. I always feel like a newscaster. Like I hear that like in my head, right? The sound drop Jim normally puts in. And then I feel like I should be looking to the side and then be like, and now movie news.
You need to do like one of those old timey news reporters, like, you know, like in the reel to reels, like in like 40s and such. Like, today in movie news, we bring you the latest and greatest. You know, that style of delivery.
And put some like swing time music behind it, and we have a Legend of Korra intro, which I'm okay with.
Okay, sold. We'll add that to the plans for our Legend of Korra cast.
What? No, gosh, we got to do that. That would be amazing. That would be so good. Anyway, I'm sidetracking us. Sorry. Will, let's start with you first. What have you got this week?
Yeah, so the news item that I wanted to talk about is one that I'm on the fence about, and so I'm hoping that maybe you guys can help me make up my mind a little bit. So for a while now, we've heard that Warner Brothers was planning a remake of Little Shop of Horrors, and really the only thing that we knew prior to this week was that Greg Berlanti was attached. Now, Brad, I know you're probably a fan of Greg Berlanti. He does showrunner on Riverdale and just like all of the different CW shows. He produces all of those, you know, The Flash and Supergirl and Arrow, all of the superhero shows. He's involved in there. So we knew that he was going to be attached to this project, but we really knew nothing else about it. Was this going to be kind of a musical or not? Because we've had a couple of these movies in the past, right? You know, the 1986 one with from Frank Oz, the Roger Corman one from before, and each were very totally different. So we knew nothing except for Berlanti. So now we've got some new news that I think helps us shape which direction this one is going. There's this report that's come out that Warner Brothers is in very serious talks. Like they've not signed anything yet, but they are the lead candidates And this is going to be for Josh Gad and Rebel Wilson to headline the movie. They're going to be Seymour and Audrey, respectively. So this is why I'm torn. So obviously this means that this is going to push this a more. They're both known for being musicians. You know, they sing in the majority of the movies they're in. So that probably this is going to be a little bit more of a musical, kind of like the last installment, right? But is it going to be good? Because I'm not sure. I feel like I'm personally at kind of peak Josh Gad / Rebel Wilson exposure. I feel like I've been getting diminishing returns with them, even though I've liked some of their past works. So help me out. Help me decide. Am I excited about this news, or should I be worried?
Man, I can tell you I am probably more on the worried side of the fence. I mean, the Frank Oz version, was that 1986? Is that the one? The musical one with Rick Moranis and Ellen Greene and Steve Martin and all them?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movie musicals, like, of all time. And it hits close to home for me. Like, all these remakes, I mean, everyone's kind of, you know, the first thing we say when we hear about these remakes is, oh God, they're remaking another movie. You know, let them come up with something original. And there are original ideas out there, but there's probably money to be made. I don't know if there's money to be made in this movie. I don't know if people are going to flock to see Little Shop of Horrors with Josh Gad, and I don't know. I'm morbidly curious to see how this one's going to turn out. That's the way I feel about it. I don't hate them for wanting to do it. I hope they do a good job with it. I don't mind loving this. There's enough love in my heart for maybe two good Little Shop of Horror movies. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'll definitely see it when it comes out. I have nothing against either Rebel Wilson or Josh Gad. And yes, they do play certain types, or they're kind of in stereotypes at this point. But who knows? Maybe I could almost kind of see it working. So we'll have to just see what happens.
I just want to know, do we know yet who's voicing the Audrey 2? Assuming it's still the Audrey 2.
Yeah, so all we know so far is that the only names are Josh Gad as Seymour and Rebel Wilson as Audrey.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, who the fuck cares about Seymour and Audrey? It's all about the Audrey 2. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Josh Gad, he's fine. Rebel Wilson, she's funny, and I guess she can kind of sing. She's usually kind of absorbed by the other voices of the Pitch Perfect crew. So is her singing strong enough to carry?
I don't know. Was she one of the Wilsons in Wilson Phillips, or in or one of the Wilson sisters in Heart? I don't remember which one.
Oh my God.
I've got it. What just happened now is, thanks, Jim. What you've really done is you've just absorbed the 20 hours that I'm going to be spending after this episode writing some Rebel Wilson fan fiction as the forgotten Wilson Phillips girl.
Oh my gosh, I can see the movie now, Rebel Wilson Phillips, where, like, you know, one of the members of Wilson Phillips is sick on a big concert day, and they find Rebel Wilson, like, singing in the, you know, common area or something, and they're like, "Hey,
hour, right?" Like, that's
something like, you know, the Wilson Phillips girls would have to be at the gym or something, I guess, to come across her in the shower, but, you know, and they're like, "Oh my God,
they're at her house. They're just at her house for some reason."
So she wasn't in Wilson Phillips. She must have been in one of the Wilson sisters in Heart then. Crazy on you.
So now what Jim's just done is he's actually created an expanded Wilson universe. There's going to be tie-ins, like Samuel Jackson's going to show up at the end of these and try to link them to the next. Like, I feel like I'm picking up what you're putting down, Jim.
Is she Brian Wilson's, like, granddaughter or something?
Oh my God,
right?
Jim,
I mean, it's all related. It's all related.
The universe cannot support any more. Like, what's next? Like, is this also, like, canonically in the same world where Tom Hanks was Castaway and, like,
yes,
the volleyball is part of this?
The volleyball is part of it.
You know what you're forgetting? You're forgetting her, like, intrinsic ties to Mr. Wilson and Dennis the Menace. Like, they're totally going to come to the show.
Right.
And then, of course, we could have to see if, like, Owen Wilson is, oh wow, if he's attached
Ka-chow!
Ka-chow!
Yeah,
Oh,
it's.
God.
I think the
We're way
problem
off track,
I'm seeing
sorry.
here is that like I have the capacity to enjoy Rebel Wilson, even though she's a bit much. I have the capacity to enjoy Josh Gad, and have like he's done some of my favorite things. But the exposure is getting a little much. He's kind of stuck in this same role over and over. And I think the thing that really worries me is both of them playing off of each other. I feel like that has a lot of potential just to be grating, and it's not the experience I want.
I guess we'll see. Moving along, though, Jim, what have you got this week?
Well, it's funny. There was a whole chat thread going in our live chat about Wonder Woman, and my news is about Wonder Woman and how one of our beloved listeners here or chat friends apparently isn't a fan of the Wonder Woman movie, and that's too bad because.
Is this J. Jack Sabbath in the chat? I think I saw that, but I didn't.
This is J. Jack Sabbath. Yes, it's too bad because Warner Brothers, the same studio we just talked about, is apparently making or going to be making a huge push for Wonder Woman to get a nomination for Best Picture and for Best Director for Wonder Woman. And what we have to remember is no other superhero movie, and how many years of superhero movies have we had, has ever been nominated for Best Picture. I don't know if Wonder Woman will be nominated, but they're going to put some money and some effort behind this, and Patty Jenkins for Best Director as well. So, which would make her the first woman to be nominated for Best Director since The Hurt Locker.
I was going to say
Catherine Bigelow in 2010.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a big deal. Boy, I mean, it sounds kind of odd that you'd see a Wonder Woman up there, but if you think about it, I mean, we had Mad Max, which is almost like a superhero movie, right? It's an action-filled epic, kind of sci-fi-ish kind of movie, cleaning up a few years ago. So it's not out of the realm of possibility if they get enough horsepower behind it. Of course, we have a lot of this year to go. There's a lot of movies yet to come that could kind of push this out of any kind of contention, even if it has any. What do you guys think about this push? Do you think it has any hope in hell? You think it's just them just maybe putting more marketing push behind their movie? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is a definite chance that this could that it could make one of the categories. Remember, we tend to have with these Oscar nominations, we tend to have like 8-9 represented films, and there's always kind of like 2 or 3 that are kind of like less of the prestige films, and they kind of fall into different categories. Like, this is the smaller one, this is the more artsy one, and this is the crowd pleaser, and I think that this could kind of fill that particular slot. Just knowing, like, and I think, and I'm talking about this from the Oscars as an awards body with their own set of voting establishments, not as the deciding council on definitive quality. But I could totally see this one having that particular spot. It's interesting because I think any other year I would have been slightly more excited for that particular potential. It's hard because for me, I think Logan came out this year. I think Logan is the best superhero movie I've ever seen. So I'm kind of like I'm like crossing my fingers, like, can that one get nominated too? Like, it's such a good movie. Patty Jenkins is definitely deserving of a director nomination, though, and I think that there's also a meta narrative that goes along with it that I think is not nominating her because she's a woman, because I think that's degrading, and that's not appropriate. But at the same time, I think the fact that she was able to be a female director for I think the second or third film budgeted over $100 million, to have made as much money as possible, and for it to be such a crossover success, I think that is definitely deserving of recognition.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this shakes out. J. Jack Sabbath had asked earlier in the chat, Jim, if you meant by putting word behind it, like buying an Oscar. And I know we kind of had a discussion about this last year, but
yeah,
can you kind of clarify that a little bit?
What I meant is, so there's money that goes into, these Oscar campaigns. I mean, they put out tons of screeners. They send the talent that's in the movie to various, functions to meet with to meet with press and go on these, like another round of press junkets as though the movie was just being released. So yeah, there's money behind it. They're not necessarily paying off, an Oscar voter, but that's what indirectly happens with some of these movies, especially ones that have a lot of financial backing behind them. Sure, they're having, they're putting on dinners and they're, doing that, and they're inviting different people. So it's, I mean, they and the actors will go out and they'll say, what's her name, Gal Gadot will go out and say, how hard she, worked for the role and all that stuff. And she's getting paid for that. So all that stuff is money. And that's what I meant. I mean, when we say buying Oscars, we're not talking about literally like buying Oscars, but there's a big, this marketing thing. You're marketing to the Oscar voters.
And if you drive around LA around this time, well, not this time of year, but later on in the year, the banners and the billboards, you get posters there that are like, for your consideration. And, so there is, I mean, we're human beings and we get marketed to, and constantly. That's part of being social animals with who exchange money for services. And the people that are part of the voting committee are a selection of like 4,500 or so human beings who can all be marketed to. So I think you're absolutely right. It's not that anyone is directly saying, here, I'm going to pay you money and in exchange you take my movie. But there are some films that are able to put themselves in front of more eyes, and then there are some films that don't have the money to market to the Oscar community that same way.
Yeah, I mean, look at a movie like Midnight, right? I mean, Moonlight. That probably didn't have a budget to do a lot of Oscar campaigning, but maybe they did some targeted things in marketing. Certainly wouldn't have the money like a Warner Brothers or Marvel or somebody would have. And Steve in the chat points out that we've actually had 2 movies this year that might be worthy of Oscars. This one, Wonder Woman, and Logan, which was also a really good, and kind of has that flavor that it could pick up some Oscar love as well. So who knows? Maybe we'll see those 2 movies duking it out for a nomination.
I'm just glad to live in a world where we got a really great Wonder Woman movie and a really great Wolverine movie all in one year.
Yeah.
And I would kind of love to see Wonder Woman and the Wolverine duking it out, because that would be amazing.
That's a good sign for the health of the mainstream / blockbuster side of the industry. Because I think one of the criticisms you tend to get around Oscar prestige time, it's like, and I hear this from people, like you get people who will say like, look, I only go to a few movies a year. I don't go and see every art house release that comes out. So when the Oscars come around, I may not have heard of 2/3 of the Best Picture nominees. So I think that getting some of these films along these lines kind of more in the running, I think is good for, like, I guess for the Oscars, because it gets more people viewing their show and kind of giving kind of what's the right word, like relevance to what they do.
I'm wondering if we're going to see a situation where like they give the Oscar to Wonder Woman and then, oh wait, no, it was actually supposed to go to Wolverine, and then there's a big fiasco. That would be funny.
No, the opening number is going to be a huge, like, high budget special effects, like face off between Wolverine and Wonder Woman on the stage. It's going to be awesome.
But what if instead of like reading the final one, they just have like Gadot and Hugh Jackman just like duking it out on stage? Like, I'm okay with that. Like, it's just like kind of a winner takes all for the statue.
That could be interesting.
But fuck the Oscars, right? Fuck the Oscars. We don't care about that shit.
Oscars so super. Anyway. All right. Well, guys, believe it or not, we have a movie to talk about, and we have not yet got there, but I know we are all excited to chat about Atomic Blonde. How do you guys feel about making that transition?
Yeah, sure.
All right, sounds good. Well, for those of you who may be new to the show, you may not necessarily be familiar with our format yet. Basically, what we're going to do is talk about Atomic Blonde spoiler-free for probably 15, 20 minutes before we give you plenty of fair warning and go into our super spoiler section. So if you haven't seen Atomic Blonde yet, and you're curious, is this worth checking out? And for some reason you value our opinion, A, thank you. We appreciate it. And B, feel free to hang out with us as we talk about the film. We'll let you know when to step away if you value your virginal innocence where the plot is concerned. In any event, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Atomic Blonde. Guys, can I just say that I am incredibly disappointed that there was no Blondie in this movie?
Or they didn't have the song Atomic in it, right? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's exactly
specifically that song by specifically that group.
Atomic.
That is a complete missed opportunity, right?
Just one letter off from Atomic and Blondie in the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have even done the movie so that it was Blondie in a super spy role, but she was doing spying in between concerts or something.
Mm-hmm. Deborah Harry.
Oh, okay, Blondie. Yeah, that too. I mean, you could also, again, if we're extended universing this one, we could actually tie that to the Blondie who makes Dagwood the really big sandwiches in the Saturday morning comic strip. So yeah, so I mean, it's all coming together. No, yeah, it's a missed opportunity. That song should have absolutely been on here.
Totally. We'll forgive not casting Debbie Harry, but not using this song. Let me get out. This is my Harry Potter wand, but I'm going to use it as an old man cane. Get off my lawn. Anyway, so hey, let's turn to Jim. Jim, give us the spoiler-free setup of this film and your initial thoughts. Is it worth seeing in theaters, waiting for rentals, skipping? Where do you come down?
Okay, so I'm going to read the plot synopsis of Atomic Blonde, the new movie by director David Leitch, Leitch. And we'll talk about him a little bit too, at least from what we know on IMDb. Anyway, here's the movie synopsis. An undercover MI6 agent is sent to Berlin during the Cold War to investigate the murder of a fellow agent and recover a missing list of double agents. So this one stars, as we talked about, Charlize Theron as the titular Atomic Blonde. We know she's blonde. I haven't figured out the atomic part yet, but we'll figure that out later. Maybe Will or one of you guys will have a insight into that. James McAvoy is in this, doing his James McAvoy thing. Eddie Marson, John Goodman appears in this, and I like to see Toby Jones in anything. Sophia Botella from The Mummy is in this one, and I like seeing her. Huh?
That was so distracting. Sorry. Normally I don't interrupt when we're doing our thing, but
yeah, Brad, don't interrupt.
I know.
I'm very pissed right now.
I'm usually the one that gets pissed about being interrupted. But it was distracting having just seen The Mummy. Sorry, I was chuckling. You asked why. That's why.
It's okay. I'll allow it. No, so going into this one, Will had gotten this one played at South by Southwest. Brad and I did not get to see the screening, and Will did go to see the screening, and he said, "Hey, this movie is pretty darn good. You guys, sorry you missed it, but some cool action in this movie, great soundtrack." And he's right. I went into this movie with pretty low expectations. I mean, I heard the comparisons with John Wick, and those kind of movies. I'm like, hey, I kind of dug both John Wick movies, and I love Charlize Theron. I love 80s music. So, I mean, even if the movie sucks, I can listen to an 80s soundtrack and be relatively happy. But this movie has much more going for it than just the soundtrack. Great action sequences. I find myself in this movie kind of getting through these plot points, waiting for the next badass action scene. And luckily for this movie, it had tons of them. It had, God, at least 6 or 8 great action scenes, with one kind of centerpiece one we'll talk about a little bit. But every action scene in this movie was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. And the story itself, that's where I kind of have a beef with this movie. I think this movie is a little bit, the story in this movie is a little more complex and convoluted than it needs to be. If you think about a movie like John Wick, it's a straightforward revenge movie, right? Somebody does something shitty to John Wick. John Wick goes all crazy and just starts mowing people down until he gets to the number one boss. This movie, you've got agents double-crossing other agents who are triple-crossing other agents. And there's something about a MacGuffin in this movie that I don't know how many MacGuffins there were, but I never was sure if we had the right MacGuffin. And it was kind of crazy. The story was very, I thought, very poorly constructed. But luckily, the performances I thought were really good. The action scenes were great, and the dialogue was great. So this is a recommend for me. People should see this movie. It looks great, but I don't think it's a movie you have to see on a big screen. I think you could enjoy this on a nice setup at home with a good sound system and a good screen. I wouldn't say it's like super cinematic. Action scenes are well choreographed and stuff, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's super cinematic. But I would say people should see this movie if you haven't seen it yet. Don't spend your money on the Emoji Movie. See this one instead. That's my recommendation.
All right. So we got a hearty recommendation from Jim. Jim, you mentioned like why Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
And my thinking is she's a nuclear solution. Like they got to get this done. Like they're sending her in. Like she's the closer. You know what I mean? But she kind of, I don't know.
Nice try, Brad.
We'll talk about it in spoilers.
I don't know if I'm buying it, but yeah.
All right. Well, you don't have to buy what I'm selling, even though I'm selling it cheap at a discount. But that's my thinking. I mean, I really like this movie a lot. A longtime been a fan of Charlize Theron, and I think she does a great job here. It's interesting. I'm not a smoker. I never want to smoke cigarettes, but watching her smoke cigarettes made me want a cigarette. It was weird, like how she sold that, I guess. So I had conflicting feelings about that. But enjoyed seeing her in this movie. It was interesting, too, because having just seen her in the newest Fast and the Furious movie, almost for me, it's like, whatever actors are in the film, like whatever they did most recently that I saw, I probably need a good 10 or 15 minutes to like mentally let go of that role and then settle into them in this new role. And I tell you, that wasn't the case so much here. I think she's really great at not being the same character in everything. And so pretty much right away, character grabbed me. I thought she sold it very well. James McAvoy, I don't know. He kind of annoyed me a little bit in this movie. A little over the top for me, but I mean, that's his character. He played it well. Jim, you mentioned some of the crazy plot twists and turns and agents and, all this stuff.
Yeah,
and
right.
It is a little confusing to follow. I think about halfway through the movie, like it spends all these times like setting up these threads, and then it just all kind of unravels until the end and it comes back together. So I feel like it kind of loses some focus for me. It sounds like I'm being really negative. I actually really liked this movie. Just a couple quibbles there. I want to talk a little bit about the soundtrack for this movie. This has been another great year for movie soundtracks. And this movie being set in 1989 in the shadow of the Berlin Wall coming down, definitely has some music from that time. I almost hesitate to mention the songs because I don't want anybody listening, right, you know what I mean, to be robbed of the same pleasure I had. So I will name no song names. That is the promise I am making to you, gentlemen, and maybe a lady or two. I won't mention the names, but I did buy the soundtrack on iTunes and I've been jamming out to it for the last couple days. So for me, when a movie has a great soundtrack like that, it really elevates it. It kind of takes me back to Baby Driver a little bit. I wouldn't say the soundtrack choices were as good as Baby Driver here, but for me, they worked pretty well. So it was good. I liked it overall. I definitely say go check it out while it's in theaters right now. We don't exactly have like a Transformers movie or something to go see right now. So go out, see this, take a chance. You might enjoy it. Will, where do you come down?
Yeah, so I would say that I probably fall a little bit beneath the two of you, because I think this film for me had some pretty glaring issues that rob, I think, the movie of being, I think, as good as it could be. So, for example, this movie is sort of divided into three parts. With a part being here is all of the spy versus spy, subterfuge, kind of that sort of stuff. And then you have just a ton of action. And then you have sort of the reveal, closeout, storyline parts of it, okay? And there's some action dotted all throughout here, but this film is really all about getting to like one crazy good set piece action sequence in the kind of like about the 2/3 mark of the movie. And this sequence is one of the best action sequences I've seen in a movie before. It's done in that uncut, there's no seams here, kind of a room to room, hallway to hallway, down the stairwell type thing. And yes, there's obviously seams, but it does the thing where it kind of like hides the seam so it looks like it's one shot. So think very much like Old Boy or the Daredevil television series.
Or The Raid.
With a little bit of the environmental damage of The Raid and some of the frenetic energy of Hardcore Henry. Put all of that into a blender and you've got this really fun action sequence right in the middle. Problem for me was the rest of the movie took me out of it so much that I didn't enjoy that action sequence as much as I could have. This film also does a bunch of it has a certain sequences that it shoots and displays on screen out of order, and I think that's a terrible mistake because it telegraphs some things that it should not telegraph by telling the story out of order. This one, I think they could have told the story just in chronologically timeline forward order, and I think would have been fine. Charlize Theron is great in this. She definitely elevates it. The music is really good. I like the soundtrack better as a soundtrack than I did in terms of its implementation in this film. I think it was just not as effortlessly woven into the fabric of this film as it could have been. There's times where like a song will be playing in like this club and you're like, oh, okay, well that's the music that's playing in the club. And then something will happen and that music will like cut out all of a sudden. And then you find out that they were listening to another song in the background the whole time. And then you're taken out of the movie for a moment going like, oh, well, which song is that? Okay, it was just for that. And that's not good implementation of the songs. I like the songs themselves. I've got the soundtrack pulled up right now and was listening to it a bunch today. But it could have been implemented better in the movie. It's a fine movie. I think you would enjoy it. If you're going to see it anyway, it's a big screen type film. I'm not like excited to recommend this to you. I don't think you're necessarily missing out on anything if you skip it, but I think for what it is, it does what it does well enough. And I hope that if they do turn this into a franchise, that they shore up some of the problems and just make it a tighter, stronger film kind of on any future iteration.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I went back and I looked up the director, David Leith, I think his name is, and he hasn't directed that many films. He's an uncredited director in, oh, shoot, I missed it now.
The first John Wick movie.
Yeah, the first John Wick movie. So there you go. He's also an actor and a stuntman primarily. He's a stunt coordinator, stuntman. So this is what, I mean, so we got a movie that's directed by a stunt guy, right? And so the action is great. I thought the action scenes were great. I didn't get lost in the action scenes, meaning like, oh, where did this attacker go? Like what's going on? Where are they now? What direction are they facing? It was all pretty well choreographed. It felt, obviously it's done for the camera, but it felt very visceral, I guess. A lot of the action felt visceral, although, of course, everybody in these fight scenes takes way more injury and damage than any normal human would. But yeah, I mean, so if they had shored up some of the story here, I think this would have been a little bit better. But still, I think this is a fun time at the movies. I don't think I can't see anybody being really disappointed in going to see this movie. I think there's something in here for everybody.
And speaking of a fun time at the movies, Steve in the chat says he's in the theater right now watching Atomic Blonde and apparently listening to the podcast.
Get out.
And chiming into the chat. Is that true, Steve?
Well, it might be. I'm the type of guy personally who, if my movie experience, if it's going to start at 8 o'clock, my ass is there at 7:30, and I'm there and I'm situated and I'm good and I have 30 minutes. So Steve could be in the same boat, just sort of like kind of getting himself prepped and ready for the show. If it's midway through the movie and you're still listening to us, Steve, please put us on pause. We'll be here afterwards.
Don't be that guy who pulls out his phone and texts and gets like a lawn chair broken over his head.
We're gonna watch that on the news. Okay. So Steve's at work. He says that was more fun than what he was really doing, and I agree too. Like, so let's all play hooky. Like, let's all just like skip our next work and just go see Atomic Blonde again. You guys in?
Oh, please! I'm totally in. Yeah, I mean, we're on record to the entire world right now saying we're going to skip work. So I don't know about that, but
this film really just needed. When I think about it, like, all of the elements are very fine. I didn't have a problem with any of the acting. I think all the acting was good. Yep. I think all of the story elements were probably okay. What this film needed more than anything was just a re-edit. I think if the elements there were cut and assembled differently, and if the music was more fluidly integrated in with those sequences, I mean, I think this could easily be a, not like the greatest movie ever or anything like that. Like, I still don't think this whole, there's been a lot of comparisons to John Wick. This is the, female John Wick, Jane Wick. I hear all these things being thrown around. This doesn't hold a candle to the John Wick franchise. But I think that this could have been much better if more care was taken into the order and the assembly of this film.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I go into movies a lot, and if a movie tries to like outsmart the audience by doing this like agent switcheroo, like, who's playing who, and if I'm trying to think about like, all right, so which side is this guy on? Is he really the bad? Is he? To me, that's taking me out of the movie. If I'm thinking of that and I'm not really paying attention to what's going on screen, that's a form for me of just taking me completely out of the movie. And that happens, it happens more than I like to admit. And I like to be more immersed in the movie. Anything you do to pull me out is going to lessen my enjoyment of it.
Yep, definitely understandable for sure. Well, I feel like we're getting to the point where it's hard to talk more about this movie without going into spoilers. So, Will, I see you nodding your head. Jim, are you cool with going into spoilers?
Yeah, let's go into spoilers. There's a few cool things to talk about here.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on into spoilers for Atomic Blonde. This is the part of the show where I awkwardly ramble to give you time to close out of the show if you need to. Hit the pause button if you're listening on digital tape delay to protect your virginal innocence when it comes to the plot of Atomic Blonde. We love you. Feel free to come back in about 10, 15, 20 minutes for plugs if you so desire, or go see Atomic Blonde and then come back and listen to our spoiler section. In any event, your time is up. We're done awkwardly stalling. So where do you guys want to start?
I want to mention one thing we didn't mention in non-spoilers. There was an aspect, we talked about the action scenes, we talked about the plot, we talked about the acting. One of the things I want to talk about was a kind of a plot thread in this movie that I kind of really enjoyed, and it was the relationship that she had with another agent, played by Sofia Boutella. I actually liked that part of the story. I liked, I liked the mysteriousness of that character. It was like Charlize Theron's character was kind of the alpha, the alpha agent, if you were, alpha spy. And the Sofia Boutella was kind of like just kind of breaking into the business. And it was almost like she was like taking her under her wing and looking out for her until bad things started to happen. But I really enjoyed the chemistry that they had. And no, I'm not just talking about the hot lesbian sex scene, which was hot, I guess, if that's your thing. But,
I guess.
Yeah, I just liked that touch in this movie, and this movie wasn't afraid to go there, which was awesome. And then I thought to myself, what if John Wick was gay? Like, what if like he had like a little boyfriend that he developed a relation? Would they ever do that on screen? Is my question.
I think that actually speaks to one of the reasons I did not enjoy the relationship with Butella as much, in that I felt like parts of it, we're in spoilers, there's some lesbian sex. And I think that it's displayed very much like male gazy, kind of gratuitous in its in its portrayal. I think that it was not servicing the characters or the story as much as it was providing titillation for kind of like straight male fans who wanted like some reason to like, oh man, this movie kicks ass like John Wick. Oh man, check her out. She's totally touching her boobs. That's my frat boy impression. Thank you.
It was really good. You should be holding a beer, not one of your foo-foo hipster like craft beers, but like a can of, I don't know, Miller Lite or something.
Can I'll like
hide the label?
See like the neck of this one and
hide the label and don't pretentiously say the name. Just show that it's a beer bottle.
Totally a Keystone.
Rolling Rock, right?
But one of the things that I do, and we're actually announcing this week the lineup for it. But I work with programming the Austin Gay and Lesbian International Film Festival, and spoilers on that. I watch a lot of lesbian movies, and one of the things that the lesbians that I work with on the programming committee. That we talk about is how you can portray those types of relationships on screen without them being designed towards a straight male audience. Because I think that we do tend to use lesbianism as kind of an exoticism type thing, as something to sort of help draw us in. I think the actual character beats between the two, like when they're just talking, are fine. But I think once we got into kind of a girl on girl pound town stuff, I think that it lost the thread of what it was doing. And to me, it felt a little skeevier than I think they could have gone.
And that's fair. That's fair, Will. I just like that they actually showed a relationship. It wasn't just a one night fling. It seemed to be a burgeoning relationship. I did sense some chemistry between the characters other than the fling in bed. Also, like, I don't know, we can criticize it for having the gratuitous lesbian sex scene, but we don't criticize it for all the gratuitous violence that it has that appeals to that very same audience. So I don't know. To me, that's kind of odd. I mean, you got it. They put the violence in there to attract, this is, even though there's a woman kicking ass in this movie, this is a guy's movie, right? This movie is not going to attract a lot of females. You're not going to take your little daughter to see it, right? So it's not like she's going to be a role model for anybody because she's a spy and she murders people. I mean, I don't know. It's odd. I mean, I understand where that criticism comes from because it's like, lesbian sex. It's like it's put in a lot of straight movies to attract the guys, but the whole movie is about violence, which is the biggest thing that attracts the guys.
But I think that that's the comparing the two doesn't necessarily, for me, make sense for this particular film because this is an action film, right? Like when you sign up for this movie, you're signing up for an action film. So whatever level of action they put into it, the gut crunching stuff, the more elegant like choreography stuff, like that's sort of part of the package. I feel like that the kind of the lesbian bait stuff on top of that is not necessarily like a part and parcel part of an action film. Like we didn't necessarily need to see Charlize Theron doing that to be a badass action star. And again, I have no problem. Like I think if it was more delicately or interestingly done, I would have been singing the praises of this because I love any queer representation that we can get wherever we can get it. But I think that the action is designed to be an action film, but I think the lesbian stuff is designed to get a rise out of the straight guys. And I think that's where the difference lies for me.
Okay. That's purposeful titillation emphasis on the tit.
Oh, God.
In terms of getting a rise. Hey, want to give a quick shout out to our good friend Corey, who's hanging out in the chat with us this week. Hey, Corey, good to see you. He wants to know if this is the Golden Girls fan fiction room.
Is it part of the extended universe? Let's add him in.
I think it is. I think Rebel Wilson Phillips goes to stay with her Aunt Blanche at one point.
Right.
When, I think
that's the
totally
tie-in.
right.
It's a little tangential, but it's there.
Yeah, it's like it's a short, like it's a 30-second background scene, so that you know that when they do the full spin-off in like 3 more movies, it's already been established. It's canon.
That's pretty true. So one thing I want to say I really liked about this movie more than John Wick. And I really like the John Wick
but
movies,
not more than lesbian sex.
No. I'm not even talking about the lesbian sex. So I'm done with tits and boobs for now in the discussion. But so
and for life.
Tits and boobs.
Whatever terms you want to use, whatever straight guys like to call them. I don't know. Like, I have straight friends on Facebook, and they like post pictures of hot girls from whatever straight like Tumblrs they follow. They're like, man, look at the tits on her. And I'm like, why are you putting this on Facebook? And then even worse yet, it's like these hick guys from my hometown are like, oh yeah, nice boob rack on that filly or whatever. And I'm just like, this is terrible. Like,
boob rack. I've never I've heard boobs, I've heard rack. I've never specifically heard those two put together as boob rack, and I'm kind of in love with that phrase now.
There you go. Well, you can thank the people from my hometown for introducing you to that. But anyway, something I really liked about Atomic Blonde more so than John Wick. Keanu Reeves is like fighting his way through this movie, and maybe he gets a cracked lip. Yeah, maybe he gets a little gash on the top of his head. But like by the end of the movie, I mean, he doesn't look that terrible. But fucking Charlize Theron, like, man, she has to take like hardcore baths of ice to try and manage like the marks and pain that she's going through. And we get to see like, this movie kind of plays a little bit with time at one point. We kind of get to see sort of the aftermath of a big fight that she's in. And holy crap, like you see her back, there are these huge bruises everywhere. She like tries to cover bruises like on her face with makeup, but like they're so bad, you still see them through. And it was interesting to me, like, why is it that a movie about a female spy, action, whatever, shows the marks more realistically than like a male action hero? Is that like a male machismo thing? Like, oh, that didn't hurt, I'm okay. Like, what is that about?
I would actually give this film credit for that. Like, this is sort of the flip side of the thing. I like I said, I didn't think the lesbian stuff was handled well, but I think what was the fact that most of the time in this type of film, think about like the sultry spy movie where the female action hero gets into like a fight, and then in the next scene she's in like some revealing lingerie, kind of doing some seduction thing, and there's not a mark on her body. That's not what we got here. We got to see that Charlize Theron's body had been put through the ringer. And I think usually when we see that in a film, when we see in this type of movie a female character who's been, who's got battle damage, it's usually to show sympathy, and it's designed to sort of like put us into like nurture protection mode, which is, a problem with the way these films are positioned. This one in particular, it didn't. It was designed to show us that, hey, she is a badass, and look at all these scars that she has before. She's been in plenty of these fights before, and she's going to carry these wounds with her, but she's going to keep fighting and stuff. So I actually thought that element of how they handled it was actually something I put in the favorable column.
Well, and just to clarify, I am too. I'm just saying I love that they did this. It was very realistic, but I'm wondering why like the John Wick movies don't do that as much. Like John Wick takes like 30 punches to the head and has like one little bitty like thing. You know what I mean? Like, Jim, what's your perspective on that? Is it like a male machismo thing? Like, where does that come from?
I don't know. I think this movie, was directed by, like I said, a stuntman, and this guy's I think he knows what the damage is, right? These stunt guys who do this stuff probably go home with those exact same wounds, right? So they know what it's like, and they're probably like, fuck this. Every other movie has this massive fight. Guy takes all kinds of hits and ends up with one little scar, one little scratch on his head. He's like, fuck this. I want to show something a little more realistic, and that's what they showed in this movie. So again, like I give it props for showing that. Male or female, yeah, you maybe you're right. Maybe there is some male thing going on there, or you know, I don't know if it's some sick male thing that, like, I hope not. I hope it's not anything like that. Like, oh, for some reason, like, males have to see women, you know, take punishment. I would hope that's not the case, but who knows what's really behind it. I just appreciated that they showed more like realistic effects of violence. Like, if you're going to show gun violence and things like that, like even a movie like Dunkirk that has a lot of violence, you don't see really the effects of that violence very much at all. It's a PG rated movie. I think this movie was rated R. I'm not sure. Because there's like, when somebody takes a bullet, you see blood. I mean, you see them bleeding out, whatever. That's realistic gun violence. I think if you're going to show gun violence, you need to show the horrible effects of the gun violence. Otherwise, you're like, what's the word? Sanitizing it too much for digestion and kind of diluting the impact of it. But I appreciated what this movie did in that regard.
Yeah, it's almost like the best elements of this film were the ones, like, to exactly the point you just made, were the ones that came from the fact that David Leitch has a background. I mean, his background, I mean, he co-directed parts of John Wick, but really he's a stunt coordinator. That's what he does. He works with the action sequences. He works with the stuntmen. He makes this stuff look good on screen. And you could tell, for me, like, whenever there was something that needed to be action-packed, when someone needed to hit hard, when that gun choreography needed to work, when I'm screaming, like, why doesn't he just pick up that thing behind him? And then he does. Like, a lot of these things were like things that I think come from the fact that he's so used to being in that particular role. I think that, I mean, even though, like, I was a little lower on this one than the two of you, I would love to see another film by this guy kind of in the sole director seat, because I think that what we've got here is a guy who's really good at one particular element, and he's sort of getting his footing on the narrative and kind of how to get the actors to develop that and how to work with all of the different, you know, kind of the different. We could be looking at kind of the dawn of, like, one of the better action directors.
Will, are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I saw both of you jump off at the same time. What do we get?
Oh,
all right.
Hey.
I think we're like, it was like Will dropped out and then Jim dropped out and I was all by myself.
Oh, I thought it was you and I, Brad. But
Well, that's what I saw, because I just saw both of you just, like, turned into your photos for a second.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird. So, Will, why don't you go ahead and back it up? You had said something about the three guys. Take it back.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we're talking about David Leitch here, and I think that this is the type of guy who really, his background is in stunt choreography and all of that, and those scenes really, really, really hit hard, really punch hard, from the gun violence scenes to that really badass stairwell scene that kind of blends almost like it's one shot all the way from this one stairwell into this other room and down and off into this car chase scene. Like, all of that was stellar. It's just the narrative stuff and maybe some of the way that the actors portrayed some of that narrative stuff that didn't work. And that makes sense. This is this guy's first time kind of in the core director's chair handling all of these different elements. We get to see what he's really good at. He didn't get a chance to, I guess, put his best foot forward on the narrative stuff. That's okay, though, because this is his learning opportunity. I feel like a few movies from now, we could totally see this guy as maybe being like the next great the next great action director. I could see him getting snatched up for some sort of like franchise too. But I think that he needed to kind of get this one out of his system so that he could learn by doing, make a few mistakes
Yeah.
in kind of a lower stakes environment. I mean, I think you're still, even with the flaws, I think people are probably still going to mostly enjoy this one. So I think this is the right sandbox to make a few of those narrative mistakes.
So I have a question. So one of the big backdrops of this film is the coming down of the Berlin Wall. What was that movie we saw? Like, it seemed fairly recently where the Berlin Wall was in
Tom
play.
Hanks. Tom Hanks.
Yes. Was that was Bridge of Spies?
Yes,
Bridge of Spies. Yeah, that's
Bridge of Spies. Okay, gotcha. So which movie did it better, guys, in terms of the Berlin Wall? Bridge of Spies or Atomic Blonde?
I think this movie actually did it better. I wasn't a huge fan of Bridge of Spies. It was okay, but I like this movie actually better than that one. And I thought it it talked about the wall a little bit more. It didn't get into the political stuff. I mean, they were kind of different movies, right? The Bridge of Spies was a political thriller. This was an action scene with the kind of the fall of the Berlin Wall kind of just as a backdrop. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, but yeah, movies wise, I like this one better. But they feature the wall in kind of a different light.
Yeah, I think for me, if we're just talking about which film did the Berlin Wall stuff better, I would go with Bridge of Spies, which I wasn't like a huge fan of. It was fine. It was good. It had some good elements. But especially Mark Rylance, who's just stellar in that. And the reason I say that is because I just sort of did a little experiment in my brain. Like, if I took the Berlin Wall elements out of Bridge of Spies, would that have fundamentally changed the movie? And I think the answer is very definitively yes. If we had taken this film and kind of set it anywhere else and taken out the Berlin Wall stuff, would this have fundamentally changed this movie? And I don't think it would have. I think that, you're basically just have spies from different countries, and it didn't matter which countries they were from, who were all after this one item that was not necessarily important in of itself. It's just the thing that, the MacGuffin that they were all fighting for. So just from a Berlin Wall perspective, I mean, I think that this film didn't necessarily, like, it wasn't a crucial part of it. But then at the same time, I don't know that it needed to be.
Well, I mean,
so it's interesting.
Go ahead, Brad.
I was just gonna say it's interesting to me that this film is set in '89 because I lived in Germany in '89. I was there for the coming down of the wall, and I know how crazy things were going. And it's funny, like, my family, we lived in a little town called Zerndorf, not far outside of Nuremberg. And like, you'd walk down the streets, and seriously, like, you'd see these teens roving the streets, and they're like mohawked, like punk haircuts. They're wearing their Jordache jeans and their Nike shoes, and they're like freaking out over David Hasselhoff. And like, all of those elements, I didn't quite expect it, I guess, going into the movie. I mean, I realized it was Germany, I guess, but like the time period, I was like, when exactly is this set? And so when she's like walking down the street and running into all this stuff, I'm like, oh my God, like, this was my experience. Not in Berlin, of course, but so I think for me, that gives me more of a personal connection to the setting in this film. I liked Bridge of Spies a lot, but I kind of liked sort of the 80s, like, grunge feel to this time period. It resonated with me a little bit more. But do you guys want to talk about the MacGuffin? Is that even worth talking about?
I don't know. There was something to do with the watch, and the watch had spy names in it, which I didn't even understand what the value of that was, other than, you know what I mean? It's like, the more I talk about the plot of this movie, the more, I don't know. Somebody would need to explain it to me. And even then, after the fact, it really doesn't matter much.
But we've seen exactly this MacGuffin in so many movies before. It's a list of undercover MI6 agents who were operating in Russia. You know, and so ostensibly, like if someone gets a hold of this list, now they know who these spies are, and it stopped whatever progress the spies were making, potentially puts them at risk, you know, that sort of stuff.
Bad spy shit.
We've bad spy. We've seen that. I mean, how many movies have we seen where it all came around a list of spy names, right? Like that's
on a disc, on a disc,
or like I'm uploading this using let's double hack and get this into the cloud right now, or whatever the most modern technology of the setting is. So I think you can set all of that aside because this is really just a film that's about a spy who is fighting these other spies, and then you get some of that classic like misdirection spy stuff, which I think is one of the elements I also ran into a problem with this. They telegraph a very obvious kind of face heel turn for one of the characters to the point that I don't think, to me, like the identity of the guy that ended up being the rival spy didn't surprise me because the film did such a bad job of hiding it. And then the film at the end decides to throw 2 more twists in for the sake of twists,
right?
Just kind of like during the last 5 minutes. I had a big problem with all of that. It wasn't warranted. It was just sort of like twists for the sake of twists.
Right. Absolutely. And at the end, of course, they have to make it all the Americans' fault. The only American in the movie had to fuck everything up.
Well, I mean, you can also say she wasn't necessarily the only American in the movie, because
no, I meant the Goodman character.
Okay, yeah, because I was about to say there's one other major American agent in this movie, and we're in deep spoilers now.
Yeah.
Charlize Theron's character was secretly working for the CIA the whole time.
What?
This movie does this thing where she's an MI6 agent for 85% of the movie, and then like after the kind of in the closing sequences you realize that she's secretly a KGB double agent, and then 5 minutes after that she's now secretly she's secretly a CIA agent who is posing as a KGB agent who is posing as an MI6 agent. I'm sorry, that's too much.
It is too much.
That's why she's atomic, Will. It's layers within layers of, killer energy.
She's just working for everyone. Like the next one is going to be like, like she's secretly working for, who is she cutting out work for? Like, the Germans? Is she going to be like a German spy who infiltrated the CIA? But before that, she was with, what are we going to next? The 90s?
Well, but here's the thing you got to remember, Will. She's got to get back to America at some point to see her niece Rebel Wilson Phillips performing. So there's got to be a whole spy sequence like in the crowd, right? We got to.
That's right. And so, okay, so I get it. So in this case, she's secretly a sentient plant person posing as a CIA agent. I get it. It all makes sense to me now. I retract my criticism. Now this actually works for me.
So it does make sense after all. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. All right, we're getting a little bit punchy and off track a little bit, guys. What do we think about shifting to plugs? Are we down? Are we good to plug it up?
Mm-hmm. Let's plug the leak.
All right, so now officially we move into plugs. This is the part of the show where we tell you about cool things we think you should check out. I have 2. And one of them I think loosely counts, but I'm going to do it anyway. One, Bear City 3 is now out on DVD, Blu-ray, and available for purchase or rental on Vimeo. Coming to iTunes, I think, like a week-ish. Yeah, something like that. We haven't gotten our copy in the mail yet.
Still haven't seen it.
Definitely excited. We have a scene in the movie. All of our friends are like, oh my God, your scene was awesome. So we definitely are looking forward to getting our official copy. But definitely go and check out the third Bear City movie. And then here's the loose one that I think kind of counts. So I am a big fan of the Abrams-verse Star Trek movies. I know that there's a little bit of, fan quibble, quabble, whatever you want to call it with that. But I enjoy them a lot. And I also enjoy gaming quite a lot. And I found out over the weekend, I totally, for some reason, spaced the release date in my head, that Star Trek Bridge Crew, the new virtual reality game where you get to take a station on the bridge, either captain, helm, tactical engineering, and you can play with your friends, match up with people online. You complete missions in space. You fly the ship, you blow shit up with it. Anyway, so that came out like 2 months ago, and I feel like a bad fan. In any event, you can ask Jim. I played it over the weekend. Even had Jim try it out a little bit, and it's fucking awesome. Like, it's my new favorite thing right now. Like, I'm literally jonesing to go like get back behind the helm of a starship. So it's interesting because it's virtual reality, and I'm playing it on PlayStation VR. And even though the graphics are kind of cartoony, they don't look super realistic. There's just something really cool about playing in that Star Trek sandbox with other people online, and the immersion of the VR really makes me feel kind of like I'm there. Like I forget that I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm like, where is like the air from that fan blowing on me? Oh, right, I'm wearing a VR headset. In any event, if you like the new Star Trek movies, or if you like the original series, you can fly the original Enterprise too via that like control board of, you know, light brights that they use. In any event, check it out. If it sounds like it's up your alley, do it to it.
It's definitely an immersive experience, because this is the first time, Brad, I think you've played it with, like, you're playing with a whole bunch of strangers on this bridge simulation. Mm-hmm. And to listen to Brad like interact with these people is funny. Like,
whoa, really?
Oh, to hear him call other people sir is definitely a strange one.
Yeah, that's a little reverse there, I guess. But
yes, sir. Anyway,
Will, what have you got this week?
So this week's kind of a stretch for me, because mostly what I've been doing this week is doing a lot of like planning and writing for like my nerd alert stuff. My Dungeons and Dragons game, which is a narrative that I 100% recommend to everyone, but I'm reserving it for an audience of 5 right now. So the one thing I will recommend that everyone does have access to is this week Amazon Prime released several of Dario Argento's films. So I'm going to plug Suspiria. This is a movie that everyone should have seen already. You know, like, this is like a classic horror film. Like, so it's one of those ones that it has it's sort of like it's one of the granddaddies of the giallo style, and everything from this film has inspired so much of what we see in horror movies afterwards. So it's one of those like film education movies. You should see Suspiria. And before now, though, it's harder to say that because it's like you have to go track it down somewhere. It's on Amazon Prime. You can watch it for free. It's an hour and 38 minutes. It's tense all the way through, and it's got this one of the single best film scores I've ever by this group called Goblin that worked a lot with Argento. It uses this kind of bell score all the way through it that sort of is off-putting and also a little creepy too. So Suspiria is on Amazon Prime. You should check it out.
Wasn't Suspiria a Def Leppard song?
I don't know if it was or not.
Suspiria. Anyway, sorry, bad
yeah.
That's Hysteria, right. Brad.
Oh, okay. So close, yet so far apart. Anyway, Will, yeah, definitely a great suggestion. Suspiria is a very well thought of film by many, many people. So that's kind of exciting that this is happening. So, Jim, you and I may have to circle around, put that on the list. We shall see. In any event, Jim, what have you got this week? Close us out.
Yeah, Suspiria will definitely be on my list because it's a classic I got to catch up with. But mine is a new movie by director David Lowery. I finally got to see A Ghost Story. Will, I know you talked about this one a lot because I think you saw it. Did you see it at Fantastic Fest or you missed it there?
No, that one did not play Fantastic Fest.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it sort of skipped the festival.
Okay.
I think it started at Sundance. Yeah.
Okay. I finally caught up with it. Man, this is a different kind of movie. David Lowery did the new Pete's Dragon, which we reviewed on the show. A very different kind of Pete's Dragon movie. Also did a movie called Ain't Them Body Saints. I'm going to say he's a very gentle filmmaker. That's the way I kind of describe it. And that's what this movie is. If you go into Ghost Story expecting a horror movie, you're going to be very disappointed. You might even walk out in the first 20 minutes because this movie is really tough, I think, in the first 20 minutes to get on board with. But once you're on board after that first 20, 25 minutes, it really builds momentum and tells a really beautiful story. It's called A Ghost Story. It's in theaters now. I don't know if you're going to find it in your multiplex, but look for it in kind of an art house setting. It's another movie by A24 who's on a roll. It's called A Ghost Story. It's got Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck in it. And Casey Affleck wears a sheet. So there you go.
Oh, did you just spoil who's under the?
No, no, I didn't.
Okay, shoo. I was going to be a little irked. I wanted to see this movie, and unfortunately, we had concurrent things going on. I couldn't get to it, so hoping to catch up with it. I don't know if it will happen before the VOD release, but definitely something that I want to check out as well. So, Jim, thanks for not spoiling it. Appreciate it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so that wraps us up for this week, I think, guys. Last thing we want to do, in case any of our listeners or watchers want to interact with you guys online, Jim, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at JJPOutWest.
All right, awesome. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. Find me on Facebook, William Lindis. Find me on Letterboxd, also William Lindis there. Surprise, surprise. And catch me outside if that meme is still a thing.
Oh, it's still around.
You chided Jim for using that joke, Will, and now you're using it?
I'm ironic hipstering it.
I guess so.
Hold on.
Will and I are
ironic hipstering it.
Will and I are going to bring it back.
Yeah. Oh goodness. All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at the handle below in my signature here. But for those of you who are not watching us on YouTube, that is at iBradPro. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm the Brad Harris that probably has a bunch of bear, chub, chaser, whatever silly label related friends. So feel free to add me, but please send me a message first so I know you're not some crazy person. I mean, I guess you could still be a crazy person, and I wouldn't know. But maybe you could give me a heads up on that too. In any event, want to give a big shout out to everyone who's joined us this week. We've got our folks who've joined live in the chat with us. So J. Jack Sabbath, Robert Miller. Hey, good to see you here. Welcome. He says, guys, thumbs up for the Dunkirk review. By the way, Robert was a fan of our review. So Robert, we're glad you enjoyed that. Corey and Steve and everybody else in the live chat, thanks for hanging out with us this week. And for all of you listening on digital tape delay, you can't see it, but I'm making a heart-shaped symbol with my hands to express my love for you. Is there like an audio way to make a heart symbol for them?
You can say, I love you, listeners.
Listeners, I love you. There, hopefully that suffices.
I think that gets the point across.
All right, well, guys, we will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.